Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's 1:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining our webinar on how the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, can help you convert your old farm equipment to new electric and improve energy efficiency throughout your operation. My name is Allison Moore, and I'm a planner for the Rhode Island NRCS, and I'm going to be acting as your moderator today. Before our speakers begin, I'd like to go over just a couple things. First off, this webinar will be recorded and posted online for those who are unable to attend today. Secondly, if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to post them in the chat box. We'll have time to answer questions after the presentation. And lastly, if you have any problems throughout the webinar hearing or seeing anything, please let me know. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Jillian Alger, District Conservationist for Eastern Rhode Island.
Hey everyone, as Allison mentioned, my name is Jillian Alger. I'm the District Conservationist for Eastern Rhode Island. So if you're joining us and you're a farmer from across the bridge, I would be your first point of contact. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to go over briefly, what is NRCS, what do we do, and I'm going to lead us into talking about the different programs that we have to offer, specifically the new IRA funding for converting old farm equipment to new efficient electric. So if we can move on to slide 2, please. So what is NRCS? NRCS, or the Natural Resources Conservation Service, is a federal agency within the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We provide technical and financial assistance to private landowners. Our programs are voluntary, and we're a non-regulatory agency. Being non-regulatory is really nice, especially when meeting with farmers for the first time. It can be a little bit daunting meeting with, the federal government for the first time and bringing them out onto the property. But knowing that we are non-regulatory, so you could never get in trouble for having us out there for anything. It's simply a conversation about conservation and opportunities that you have to work with us. We can move on to the next slide. NRCS is able to work with growers regardless of size, location, or type, which is especially helpful in a state like Rhode Island, where, yes, we do have a lot of large farms. We also have a lot of smaller urban settings as well. So as long as it's an agricultural operation, we can assist. We range from working with traditional ag operations, such as dairies and vegetable farms, to working on oyster restoration, forestry, and urban settings as well. We also do a lot of work with wildlife habitat. So we can go to the next slide. Our programs are geared toward addressing resource concerns. So oftentimes a farmer comes to us with a problem they're facing, and it's our job to provide, one-on-one personalized advice that fixes the problem that they're coming to while identifying and addressing a resource concern. So what does that really mean? And an example that I like to give, because it's kind of visually makes sense, is if we have a beef or dairy operation, farmer comes to us and says, the pond that my cows used to drink out of is totally filled with algae. In the middle of the summer, they can't get any water because it's just totally green. How can we get the algae out of the pond? Well, the first thing that I would think of is, what is the resource concern? The resource concerns is livestock water and water quality and nutrient management, right? And so what we would actually recommend in that situation would be fencing the animals out of the pond and providing a well, livestock pipeline, and watering facilities as an alternative. Of course, in very specific, like natural disasters or inclement weather situations, the pond is always there as a backup, but it wouldn't be the primary source of water. So we would address the livestock water needs with a well and livestock water facilities, and also address that water quality resource concern by getting the cows out of the pond. So we then create, so after we identify what opportunities and what resource concerns are there, we create a conservation plan that can be used to qualify for our many different conservation programs. We can go to the next slide. So today we're going to specifically talk about IRA, but I wanted to briefly touch upon some of the other programs that we have. The first and foremost is EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. That's our basic program that most people get involved with first, is addressing resource concerns. We also have funding under AMA, or the Agricultural Management Assistance Program, and that is for risk management, so drought prevention, fire prevention, those sorts of things. We have the Conservation Stewardship Program, which incentivizes farmers who are already doing a good job to continue doing that good work. And then we also have easement programs and other programs as well, but those are our three primary. And so under EQIP is this new funding, the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. And so in addition to our normal obligation of funds this year, we've also received $5 million through the Inflation Reduction Act, which is targeted at reducing emissions and climate change, climate improvements. So that's what we're here to talk about today. IRA is going to be very specific practices. So, I mentioned earlier about a cow drinking water out of a pond. What I was talking about there wouldn't apply under the Inflation Reduction Act. This is very specific to climate improvements or energy improvements, which is why we're going to be talking about engine replacement, energy efficiency improvements, and we're going to have one of the engineers talk more about that. All right, well, I think we're going to hand it over to Mike to take it from here.
Thanks, Jill. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Wilkinson, and I'm a civil engineer with NRCS in Rhode Island. And I'll be talking about a few of our conservation practices that are eligible for this IRA funding. And when I say conservation practice, referring to essentially an NRCS implementation tool that's used to address specific resource concerns. And the practices that I'll be touching on relate to concerns such as energy and efficiency. So the first one I'll be talking about is called combustion system improvement. And this practice is used to replace, repower, or retrofit an existing agricultural combustion system and convert it to electric. So starting out, what do we know about combustion engines? Well, they contribute to air pollution. Diesel engines in particular emit oxides of nitrogen, particulate matter, and carbon dioxide. And so oxides of nitrogen contribute to production of ground level ozone, which is also known as smog, and that can damage crops, trees, and other vegetation. Particulate matter is a host of other chemicals that are associated with the burning of diesel fuel, and inhaling these can lead to asthma and respiratory illness and can affect long-term health. And then CO2, carbon dioxide, is a greenhouse gas that contributes to global warming and climate change. So older combustion engines are also associated with higher emissions, and that could be because it's just an older technology. We know that technology is always improving rapidly, and so an old combustion engine is likely to be less efficient than a new combustion engine of the same type. Older engines also could have been subject to less stringent emissions requirements at the time they were manufactured. And also, engines naturally lose efficiency over time, even with routine maintenance. So moving on to electric engines, there are no air emissions associated with the operation of an electric engine. There have been many recent advances in electric motor and battery efficiencies. I know on the passenger automobile side of things, we've seen a huge influx of electric vehicles. Most notably, I would say, probably Tesla. And technology, again, is rapidly improving. And I believe that this will trickle into the agricultural world as well. So I listed here a couple different tractor manufacturers that do have electric options for tractors, and that includes Select-Track, Monarch, Kubota, and New Holland. I mean, the one pictured on the bottom right of this slide is a Select-Track tractor. But there are other manufacturers following soon. I saw some things about John Deere, Bobcat, and Case IH all developing electric options for their equipment. And there are, of course, eligibility requirements for this. And so the IRA funding is available for conversion from internal combustion to electric powered equipment. And internal combustion, that's referring to things such as natural gas, gasoline, diesel, ethanol, or propane powered equipment. And so the replacement engines or equipment must be new. And this ensures that there's only one payment per equipment. If we were to permit used equipment to be allowed as part of this program, then it runs the risk of NRCS paying out multiple times for one piece of equipment as it changes hands. The old engine must start and have no drivetrain problems, and if applicable, have a working power takeoff. And this is because if the engine or equipment is not operational, then it's not producing emissions, and the intent of the program isn't being met if it were to be replaced. The equipment must also be off-road exclusive. Unfortunately, we can't pay for a new F-150 Lightning electric pickup truck. And then also the old engines must be decommissioned, and that could be by means of bringing to a facility for crushing, or you could drill a hole into the engine block and oil pan. The main purpose is that this engine just has to be taken out of operation. And this does require documentation from NRCS, whether it be photos, paperwork, or NRCS's actual presence during the decommissioning. This might be a bit hard to see, but it's just an example of our field verification worksheet. And so the NRCS planner and engineer will work with any interested producer in filling out this sheet, which includes some info on the existing engine that they're trying to replace, as well as a checklist for some of our eligibility requirements. So equipment that is eligible could either be mobile equipment or stationary equipment. And I've listed some examples here, like forklifts, dozers, excavators, tractors, mowers, sprayers, all types of mobile equipment like that. And then stationary equipment could include irrigation engines, pumping plants, or heaters. And I'll emphasize that this is not an all-inclusive list. If there is someone that has a piece of equipment that is interested in this program and it's not listed on here, then your best bet would be to reach out to NRCS, and we will work with you on that. So the next practice that I'll be talking about is called energy efficient agricultural operation. And this includes on-farm facilities, equipment, and management strategies that provide increased energy efficiency. And this would result in greenhouse gas emission reductions and could deliver the co-benefits of lowering input costs. And so some common inefficiencies that could be experienced on an ag site could include low efficiency exhaust fans in agricultural buildings. It could be inefficient ventilation in greenhouses, electric motors that operate at a constant speed despite having varying loads, manually controlled ag systems for heating and cooling, ventilation, watering, etc. Could be old electric or oil-fired hot water heaters, or even low efficiency air heaters. And then in the case of maple syrup production, low efficiency evaporators. And some potential improvements for some of those inefficiencies could be things such as horizontal airflow, greenhouse ventilation. And that's just, and it's pictured on the top right of the slide, and it creates a horizontal air circulation pattern that promotes efficient heat and moisture distribution. And then the next picture down is a picture of an example of a variable speed drive for an electric motor. And these are something that are attached to an existing motor, and the motor speed can be adjusted to better match the load requirements from a specific piece of equipment, and therefore that would reduce power consumption. We can implement automatic controller systems that can be installed on an existing manually controlled ag system used for ventilation, heating, or cooling. We can implement high efficiency tankless water heaters in place of low efficiency heaters. We can implement high efficiency air heaters or even root zone heating in greenhouses. And then again, in the case of maple syrup production, we can utilize reverse osmosis and preheater units. And so the last practice that I'll talk about is called energy efficient building envelope and lighting. An energy efficient building envelope is a boundary between a conditioned space and an unconditioned space that meets or exceeds best practices for energy efficiency. And so some improvements for this practice could include wall insulation for agricultural facilities. And the emphasis on this is for agricultural facilities. We can't put insulation in your house or garage as part of this program. We can seal gaps in greenhouses. We can add insulation in the end walls or foundation walls of greenhouses. We can add greenhouse screens to provide a means to better control solar heat gain and heat transfer during night or cold weather, and that would reduce energy use. We can insulate attics and ceilings in agricultural buildings. And then also we can implement LED lighting in lieu of low efficiency lighting, such as incandescent or fluorescent bulbs. And better yet, dimmable LEDs save even more energy since the light can be adjusted. And again, I'll emphasize that these are just for agricultural operations. So with that, I will turn things back to Allie to talk about how to receive assistance.
Thanks, Mike. So if you're interested in any of the practices that were just talked about, these are your 5 steps to receiving assistance. The first 2 steps kind of go hand in hand, beginning with planning and visiting your local NRCS field office or scheduling a site visit with a planner to discuss your goals and decide what practices might be best for you. And then with the help of your planner, you can put in an application. The next 2 steps are on our end. We will make sure that you are eligible for the programs that you're applying for, and after that, your application will be ranked to determine who will receive funding. And if you do receive funding, you will sign a contract with the NRCS, and that will outline what practices you are going to complete, the timeline for your work, and the amount of financial assistance that you will receive. Once that contract is signed, you can begin work on your land. And that is step 5 of implementation. So once your contract is signed, you can begin implementing, and your planner will be there along the way to help continue answering questions that you may have. I'm going to go to the next slide. And here you can find all of the contact information for the 3 districts in Rhode Island. So if you're interested in putting in an application, the next step would be to contact your the field office for your district, and they will put you in contact with a planner who can help you go through your application. So with that, that is the end of our presentation. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to share them in the chat now or raise your hand and we'll answer any questions. One last thing I'd like to mention as well is that our current deadline for funding is Friday, May 17th. So if you're interested, get back to us as soon as possible so that we can get the ball rolling on this.
There were a couple of questions in the chat box. The first one was, are there any facilities to decommission the engines in Rhode Island? And to which I answered yes, there's some junkyards. We just had one done a couple of weeks ago to destroy the old equipment. And just recently, Catherine asked, will there be additional deadlines and rounds of funding? At this time, the round of funding that we have announced is the May 17th. However, we're for as long as we have funding, we will be processing applications, and there will certainly be funding for 2025 as well. This might be an engineering question from Martha. Does it have to be an even trade, tractor for a tractor, same horsepower, or can you trade a tractor for a skidder?
So my understanding is that it has to perform a similar function. And as far as the horsepower goes, it would have to be within reason, which I know isn't an ideal answer, but on a case-by-case basis, we can review that.
Another question that might be for Mike is, are walk-behind tractors included in the program?
My initial thought would be yes. If it's producing emissions and used on your facility, then there's a chance that we can replace that with electric as part of this program.
Okay. And Martha asked, does it have to be an electric vehicle?
For the IRA funding, yes, it does.
Corey asked, is there an age limit on what is destroyed, or doesn't matter as long as it's fully functioning?
Yeah, that's correct. As long as it's fully functioning and used in operations at your property, then it could be eligible. But that's to say, as far as a new combustion engine goes, if someone just bought a new combustion tractor and is looking to swap it, I believe we ask for 2 years in operation before they're eligible.
Okay, it doesn't look like there's any more questions coming through, but we can stick around for a little bit. If anyone else does have anything, just let us know. Otherwise, if you've had your question answered, thank you for attending our webinar. Brian just asked, is an energy audit required to be eligible for the energy improvements?
It depends on the need. There is no requirement necessarily to have an energy audit for several of those, but if there's a large scale operation looking to do complex work across the whole system, we will recommend an energy audit first, but we are not asking for an energy audit for every of the opportunities under that energy practice. So depending on the activity, we may recommend it, but it's not required.
And Corey asked, is there a priority on what gets traded in? Example, irrigation pump over farm tractor or forklift over backhoe.
I can chime in, and I'm not aware of there being a priority. I'm not sure how things get ranked in planning, but from an engineering side, I don't know that there's a favorite or a priority for the conversion.
All right, if there are no further questions, I think we can probably get off of here. So thank you, everyone.